Good morning, Wabash. Speaking today at Pioneer Chapel is alumnus Joe Mount from the class of 2015, Joseph Julian, Zach Alvarado, and James Love III with their talk titled Past, Present, and Future of Queer History. Joe Mount has now entered that awkward phase of his life where he has spent more time post-Wabash than enrolled at the college. As a student, Joe was a religion and theater double major, an experience which culminated in a one-man performance recounting his exodus from the Mormon church as a gay man. He was also a member of Tau Kappa Epsilon, served as a Shout president, and frequently hit reply all when addressing the campus. After spending some time teaching middle and high school in Indianapolis post-grad, he worked with the Indiana State Board of Education on policy related to charter schools, student performance, and community organizations. Since 2019, Joe has worked with the Indiana Youth Group, a nonprofit focused on LGBTQ youth advocacy throughout the state of Indiana. Last year, he designed and launched IYG's multi-million-dollar homeless program, which is now the largest young adult housing provider in Indianapolis, and currently serves as the organization's director of development, overseeing fundraising, partnerships, and expansion. Joseph Julian has served as the 105th chairman of the Student Senate since January 2021. He is a philosophy major and a political science minor from Mount Vernon, Indiana. When he's not reading in the library, you can find him hiking or fishing in a nearby state park, acting in a play, or singing with the Glee Club. He is a bass too. Although he loves all kinds of music, he especially enjoys listening to classic rock, jazz, and his native bluegrass. After graduating from Wabash, Joseph plans to earn his PhD in philosophy with the eventual goal of becoming an academic administrator. Zach Alvarado has given his first 2 years at Wabash College to the College Mentors for Kids program and to the role of the first financial wellness peer mentor. He is a psychology major with a minor in English and education from Peru, Indiana. He can often be found in his usual bird's nest in the library, overlooking the 1832 Brew Lounge. Zach enjoys turning off his phone to hike, play the saxophone, and learn everything about Star Wars. He also likes to walk his dog, Kine, when he's with his family. He currently writes for The Bachelor and is a member of the Wabash Christian Men and Shout. Upon graduation, Zach wants to earn a master's degree that will help him work with nonprofit organizations that aid in education reform. James Love is a secretary of the Malcolm X Institute of Black Studies, a member of Shout, and works part-time at the 1832 Brew for the 4th year in a row. He became a brother at Tau Kappa Epsilon his sophomore year and is from Indianapolis, Indiana. James enjoys long walks on the beach, writing poetry, and listening to his killer playlists. After graduation, he plans to just vibe. Please join me in welcoming our speakers.
The last time I addressed a crowd on this lawn was my own graduation. As I was then, I'm grateful to be granted this opportunity and delighted to return to this place I considered home up until a few years ago. By means of introduction, my name is Joe Mount. My pronouns are he, him, and you can think of my work as the gay agenda that you've been warned about. I work in schools to improve curricula, promoting inclusivity and critical thinking. I work with state lawmakers on equitable practices and policies, sometimes suing or organizing to make that happen. I receive the occasional death threat, the odd slur, and I once managed to dodge a rock that ended up shattering the window behind me instead. I'm no stranger to the risks of being a sexual minority, as well as somebody who is actively striving to take part in history, queer history in this case. But to get to this point, I had to realize my own queerness. As a younger man coming to terms with my sexuality, I found myself thrust out of the typical narrative of the cisgender white American evangelical. Not by much, but being gay interrupted my narrative just enough that I began to wrestle with the stories that I knew to be true as a child. And so, as so many of us do when we start to grapple with difficult questions, I turned to God. Luckily for me, that pursuit of knowledge coincided with my enrollment here, after coming out of the closet and leaving the Mormon church at 18. Under the masterful tutelage of these professors, I gained new insights and perspectives on myself and the questions I struggled with. Though my heart and body belonged to the theater and stage, my mind wandered to those questions of theology and history and where I fit in it all. The more I studied, the more I found myself contending with a history so much bigger and complicated than the one I had known. For example, in the Mahabharata and Kama Sutra, yes, that Kama Sutra, the Vedic text predating the formation of the New Testament by several centuries, we find clear examples of a third gender that is neither male nor female, the Hydra, and key textual figures changing genders and cross-dressing without judgment or punishment. Another example, Alexander the Great, student to Aristotle and one of the greatest conquerors in history, is known to have been bisexual and mourned the death of his best friend and lover to such an extent that it was compared to the love of Patroclus and Achilles, another pair of male lovers from the Greek histories. The presence of asexuality, bisexuality, and homosexuality in hundreds of species on this planet, instances of animals changing their reproductive organs or reversing their life cycle entirely to go through puberty backwards. The sacred band of Thebes, the soldiers of Sparta, the two spiritual leaders native to the Americas, the intimate nature of Lincoln and Speed's relationship, the chemical castration of Alan Turing after cracking the code of the Nazi Enigma machine, the first brick thrown at Stonewall, and the activism of Marsha Johnson and Sylvia Rivera. Even the opening of a gay youth center in Indianapolis by Chris Gonzalez and Jeff Warner for those abandoned in the AIDS crisis, a place where I now work. I proudly admit that I was greedy in my education as I started to realize my potential. I read and wrote and debated, absorbing what I could to reorient myself after an unceremonious exit from the life I had known. I found myself embracing a radically new understanding of the world and was able to trace a new line through history to find my place in it. A place that is infinitely more diverse, chaotic, and beautiful than I would have dared dream as a kid. The stories that I had been raised with and clung so desperately to fell away as I realized how truly queer history is. These realizations led to new possibilities as I no longer found myself constrained by feelings of not fitting into the historical narrative. I no longer feel compelled to adhere to socially enforced norms or expectations on gender, sexuality, love. I'm free to experiment and play with these concepts as I see fit, redefining them in a context of a broader and more inclusive history. And that's why I'm here today, to invite you to do the same thing, to embrace a broader understanding of history and your place in it. Of course, this request begs the question, why queer history? Why does it have to be about gender and sexuality at all? The answer, because just as with race, we must suffer for the sins of our forebears and our contemporaries who explicitly make it about the queerness. If more than half of transgender and non-binary kids didn't seriously consider suicide last year, I'd be out of the job. If I weren't able to be fired or evicted from my home just for being gay in a third of the states in this country, this wouldn't be so important. If the people and institutions of our society were able to understand that hostility toward gender and sexual minorities, or any marginalized group, is born out of ignorance of our own history, then the queerness wouldn't matter. But it does. Furthermore, we cannot ignore the simple fact that life, despite some of humanity's best efforts, is inherently about sex and love. Every poet, loving couple, or sex-obsessed fraternity brother can confirm this simple fact. But it's worth noting that this is confirmed even in the speeches you are going to hear today. Relationships, self-love, parenthood, quintessential parts of life, no matter your sexuality or gender. In short, queerness has everything to do with history. Therefore, it is our duty to know it and know it well. So here we sit, in one of these mighty institutions of learning, who itself is grappling with its own understanding of its culture and its legacy, our collective history. This struggle with our own queerness is thrown into even sharper relief when we consider Wabash College is one of the last remaining single-gendered we consider Wabash College as one of the last remaining single-gendered institutions in this country. And that's without a required gender studies component in its curriculum or updated policies to account for gender beyond the binary. It's an impressive accomplishment, but there's some clear opportunities for growth. And this growth is not pain-free. Even now, some of you are panicking over the thought of a gender studies class and forming arguments for a bachelor article on why Wabash should remain an all-male school. Good. Start to unpack that discomfort and ask yourself why these ideas cause you to feel this way. As any dancer, athlete, or therapist will tell you, growth is not always comfortable, and I'm a firm believer in genuine debate, so welcome an honest conversation. If the crises of the last few years have not done so, then let this example of Wabash's reckoning with our own queerness show that history is an active thing that each of us have a part in. Make no mistake, you are taking part in a broader debate simply by attending this college. As we have done in years past, we must ask ourselves what it means to be a men's college. But now we do so at a time when the concept of masculinity is being reimagined more so than ever, and science presents us with new understandings and possibilities related to sex and gender. So to the students, I ask, what does it mean to attend an all-male college in light of queer history? And to the college, I ask this, are you doing enough to prepare your students to answer this question? This college is one that prides itself on the accomplishments of its graduates. Listen again to the words of our school song today. Doctors, lawyers, CEOs, policymakers, the innovators and leaders of tomorrow. That is the illustrious promise of a Wabash education. But I say this kind of education demands more of us. The status quo is not ours to keep, but to challenge. History should not be viewed through any single perspective, but many, including the queer one.
Good morning, Wabash, and thank you, Joe, thank you, Sphinx Club, and thanks to all of you. I'd like to take a moment to dedicate my portion of this talk to a handful of people I consider to be heroes. Whether you're from long ago, a few years past, or if our adventure together is really only just beginning, although you're not my blood relatives, you are my family, and you're the world to me. St. Augustine once wrote that a people was a multitude defined by the common objects of their love. I can think of no better description for the community, for the family into which I've now been welcomed. And how wonderful it is to be able to call myself a proud member of a community like this one. Our rich diversity is what makes us proud, as does our shared history, which begins, of course, where our experiences converge on the common objects of our love. Namely, our love for one another, for self-knowledge, for an authentic life, for equality, and for, how can I put this, an unconventional dress sense, just to name a few. When one becomes a part of this community, it may be far from easy to discern where one fits into it. That sure wasn't easy for me. This community includes people with vast amounts of experience, wisdom, know-how, street smarts, the rest. And there's also those of us that have barely figured things out yet. There's those that seem to hit their stride and seem to know what they're doing before some of us make up our minds whether to proceed, let alone how. And to top it all off, there's cultural nuances, unique traditions, and all sorts of confusing acronyms you have to learn. I'm talking, of course, about the community which calls itself Wabash College. Expecting me to say something else. And yes, I would stand by my earlier claim that what with the stripes, the pots, the occasional construction worker safety vests, the Wabash man's dress sense is a bit unconventional. And when we, each and every one of us gathered here today, took those giant steps to become part of the Wabash family, we undertook a truly monumental journey. And I invite you all to join me now in reflecting on how being a part of this place and with these people has helped you to discover new dimensions of who you are. And let me just say, I'm very proud of all of us. There are indeed many times in life during which it becomes necessary to adjust to a new set of circumstances, to find a new niche, and to find a new or even additional family of sorts to call your own. Whether it's in enrolling at a college or a university, starting a new profession, becoming a part of your boyfriend's or girlfriend's family, finding the right workplace or graduate school, or moving to a new town. And this is also the experience many of us share when we come out as LGBTQ. I stand here before you today, a gay man that's known that about himself for nearly 5 years. And yet I would not be standing here speaking about myself if it weren't for finding a family, a chosen family, to support me in my journey. And without them, I'd still be in the dark, more than likely attending another institution, and it's not outside the realm of possibility to imagine myself right back where I started, pretending to be someone that I'm not. Coming out of the closet, yes, can be incredibly validating, freeing, and even uplifting. But as you're no doubt aware, this process can also be a painful one. Sometimes, as was the case in my own life, relationships with mentors, family members, friends, girlfriends or boyfriends, and even best friends can become strained, frayed, or even broken. Our relationship to faith, to our beliefs, can be shaken or can be cut off entirely, whether it's by leaving by our own choice or by being driven out or made to feel unwelcome. All of this, too, is a part of life, and one which can unfortunately happen to any of us. But I've learned that hiding who you are and acting as if you're ashamed of that makes it something of shame. And it's not. The 20th century Catholic theologian Thomas Merton wrote that, quote, "As long as we are on earth, the love that unites us will bring us suffering by our very contact with one another, because this love is the resetting of a body of broken bones. Even saints cannot live with saints on this earth without some anguish, without some pain at the differences that come between them," end quote. Resetting broken bones. What a powerful visual for what love feels like. But Merton's choice of words suggests there's something necessary about this pain. If we don't reset these broken bones, after all, we risk living the rest of our lives fragmented, fractured, limping. But being who you are, loving those whom you love, is worth it in the long term, because coming out, in whatever form that may take for you, is the process whereby we differentiate ourselves and recognize that which makes us unique. And yet I contend that coming out is a story told and retold in all of our lives. It's a fully personal series of moments, and yet it's a history we share. And although I've described it as a worthy enterprise, that isn't to say the costs involved aren't great. They are. And I'm not just talking about the little stuff, you know, the snide comments, the petty words, the slurs you hear shouted at you from a speeding truck, nasty emails in your inbox, the former professor telling you that, quote, "exaltation of one's sexual preference is nothing but narcissistic bad manners," end quote. Or that your being gay is a function of some political ideology or agenda, which is confusing because, as I recall, the gayest part of my political agenda so far is that I confess I did vote in favor of those comfy white hoodies last year in Student Senate. Those things are unapologetically cute, and as discussed earlier, Wabash men are in desperate need of assistance with their wardrobes. But I digress. It's one thing to deal with people whose opinions of you formed long before they even met you. Not that you asked for those opinions anyway. But it's another thing entirely to hear things like that from people you love. A stray, thoughtless word can be the shrapnel which injures a target for which you were never aiming, sending a once trusted relationship to its abrupt and painful conclusion. Now, sometimes, if hearts are in the right place and with a great deal of courage and patience, a broken relationship with a family member can be healed, or a friendship split apart for many years can be made whole again. But I also recognize that these examples represent the exceptions and not the rule. Sometimes the truth is those relationships can't be healed, and nor should they be, if those relationships are not based on a foundation of mutual and reciprocal trust, love, respect, or if their underlying motive is controlling who you are rather than seeking to understand who you are. Letting go can be an excruciatingly slow, infuriatingly unpredictable grieving process. It takes a special kind of moral fortitude to know when to do so, and even more strength of will to actually follow through with it. If you're expecting me to say that letting go of someone special to you will always turn out okay in the end, or that it'll always work itself out with time, or that it's somehow fair to have to go through that, I'm sorry to disappoint you, because I can't tell you that. Because provoking someone's spiteful act as a consequence of your love isn't okay, nor is it fair, and it won't always get better with time. Sometimes I still miss the people I've had to leave behind. Fractures, after all, can take an awfully long time to heal. But while it's true that ending a relationship is an act of deliberation and resolve, so too is beginning one. There are people who hold the potential to reach you on unexpected levels of depth, if only you're brave enough to let them. They are the people you might even one day call your family, your chosen family. So how will you know them? I found these people will meet you where you are and see you primarily as where you could be and who you could be. In the context of Wabash, they might be professors, coaches, or leaders who go above and beyond, become invested in your growth, and for whom "I'm fine" is never a sufficient answer to "how are you?" They might be the friends who make you laugh, become your pillars of strength in times of need, and guide you by their example. And for me, coming into this college with no idea how to fit in here and no clue how to navigate the waters of being newly out, it was Wabash men who took me under their wing and helped me tremendously with both. These men are exemplars of character, strength, patience, grace, and they are some little giants. Your chosen family will encourage you, inspire you, teach you, challenge you, and help you to become your very best possible self. When you find yourself lacking clarity of vision, your chosen family will see you as everything of which you will be capable. They'll believe in you when you struggle to do the same. So pay attention, gentlemen. Be present, be aware, be open. You never know when a handshake, a kind email, or a chance introduction to a mutual friend might just lead to the newest member of your family, maybe at this very college, in this very aptly named brotherhood. At my ringing in ceremony, one muggy August day in 2018, the then president of the National Association of Wabash Men made a bold claim. He said, quote, "You will be called uncle by the children of at least one man in this room," end quote. I confess that I did not believe him then. I was distrustful, I was cynical, and I was spending far too much of my energy keeping myself closed off. I didn't come out to Wabash because I couldn't see how anyone here could ever come to care about me that much. But now I think my initial assessment was dead wrong, and I'm beyond proud to count not only that past president of the NAWM, but also his successor to be among my personal mentors and beloved members of my chosen family. Both of them are larger-than-life figures on this campus, outstanding leaders in their respective fields and path breakers, and the first two in a row, openly gay presidents of the NAWM, Rob Shook and Mark Nichols. You have my eternal gratitude. I'm humbled to walk in your footsteps. Seeing yourself as your chosen family sees you is a daunting and it's a demanding task. It's no feel-good exercise in vanity and no narcissistic display of bad manners. It's hard. It's honest work. When you strive to do as the best of your mentors do, as I said before, when you begin to see yourself not in terms of what you've lost or who you can no longer be, but instead see yourself as who you could be, that is one of the most powerful feelings in the world. It's the kind of introspective heavy lifting that prompts all the right questions. Is this where I'm meant to be? Am I with the right people right now? Do they share my values and my goals? And what could I be doing better right now? None of that to say your roots aren't important. Of course they are. The ground of your being, the rock beneath your feet, will always be a vital part of who you are, but you must not allow your self-image to begin with "I was." When you center yourself around who you are, cast a thoughtful glance back on who you used to be, and strive to continuously come out, you'll be well on your way to surrounding yourself with a meaningful community to the benefit of all. After all, that, gentlemen, is what we're here to celebrate. The history of being LGBTQ is a history of coming out and drawing together as we overcome personal barriers, insurmountable odds, and societal prejudices. It's a story of personal loss and of family found. It's about being just as deliberate about whom you let in as you are with whom you let go. It's a story of those who've already come out and of those whose new families still await them. It's all of us, a multitude, defining ourselves, not just by ourselves, but by the common objects of our love, our chosen family. Thank you.
Good morning, Wabash. Hopefully you have heard some moving stories during this chapel talk, which has been the first of its kind in Wabash history. Never before has this college set aside a chapel talk for the purpose of queer history. A lot has changed since our alumni's time here. From the founding of Shout until this very moment, queer people have faced many obstacles thrown their way by this college. Some alumni have shared heartwarming stories of their fraternity brothers coming to their aid when in need, and congratulations they received when they came out. Other stories, however, are not so pleasant. Some have criticized, insulted, and abused queer people in our community by way of words and physical violence, as well as other acts of homophobia. The enrollment of gay students, as well as bi students, at our college is steadily increasing with each class year. We deserve as much of the same opportunities as everyone else. Being aware of these facts, we need to know who our friends are and where we are safe. In my experience, members of the faculty have been my greatest support since coming out. Their offices are my safe spaces. My professors have shown me respect, understanding, kindness, gratitude, and patience, and I am all the better for it. Current students, whom I am proud to call my friends, have taken their time to understand me and why I am gay and what it really means. That is a kindness I am grateful for, but was not familiar with for 7 dreadful years. I first realized I was gay when I was 12 years old, but I did not accept it until I was 19. 7 years of personal torment tore me apart terribly, but the help and guidance of those with me now has made putting me back together a fun journey. When I was in denial, I took on personality traits to better deter others away from my gayness, which many queer people do. Some strategies may have worked, others did not. Having to always fear what I said and knowing that any slip of the tongue could ruin everything plagued me every day. I told myself that I was disgusting, that I deserved to go to hell for even existing. I prayed and prayed for it to go away and that I would just wake up the next day completely normal, whatever that meant. But I never did. Day in and day out, I punished myself for something I had no choice over. I told myself the devil is tempting me or God is testing me. It was not until I left my hometown, met other people, and heard their stories that I was finally able to think differently about what I was. After a few more years of self-hatred and talking myself off a ledge, I accepted that I am gay and told those who deserve to know. Now to the future parents who are listening. Most of you will be fathers. When your child comes to you and tells you that they are gay, there are many possible responses. I trust that most of you would love your child and support them in whatever way they need, no matter who they are. Even if you may have raised a girl for 13 years, but then she realizes she is a boy, and now you have to raise a son. Difficult situations like that divide the good parents from the bad ones. If you want children, you must be ready for anything and everything that may come with it. The possibility your child is queer is one of them. So many are uneducated on what to do when someone comes out to them and the changes that follow. Educate yourselves on what you can do when it is your child, brother, sister, or friend, because that makes all the difference. That is all the more reason to know what you are getting into when you are becoming a parent. But who can really prepare anyone from parenting? Ask any parent if they have an easy time raising their kids, and hopefully they'll give you an honest answer. Never have a plan for your child's lives because they will become their own people with or without your help. By simply loving your potentially queer children and teaching your straight children to respect them can make all the difference in the way society treats them and others like them. I grew up in a Christian household. My grandfather was a pastor, and some of my closest friends in high school went to the same youth groups I did. I remember being told that people like me are not normal, that we all need to go away, or that we should not act on what we are, and never indulge in relationships beyond friendship. The intimacy and bonds I grew up seeing in movies and TV, I was told I wasn't allowed to have. I know the verses and sermons about people like us. Hearing what you are will send you to hell is not a great thing to hear for years of your life. For those of us that identify as religious in any capacity, I ask you to question your beliefs. Ask yourself if you are following your deity or your religious community, because there is a difference. Not everything that is old and sacred is right. Our elders can be wrong. Words can be misinterpreted and mistranslated. Old traditions can be harmful in the present. I, as well as the rest of us, are criminals in 72 countries, some of which will kill us if they discover what we are. There are many who think that I have a mental disease, and more people who would condemn me to hell for it. This college emphasizes the importance of asking questions, for goodness sake. So why not ask yourselves, why would a loving God condemn me to hell over something I never chose? Events like the Pulse Club shooting 5 years ago show that there are still those that despise us enough to walk into a club and unload a few rounds on a crowd of strangers. Ask yourselves if you really want your children living in a world where that still happens, because they can become victims of such violence. The passing of bills that allows people to refuse to serve us or give us health care is also evidence of this extreme homophobia. Queer youth are already 3 times more likely to commit suicide than heterosexual youth, and that does not diminish heterosexual youth in any way. Too many queer people kill themselves due to how their church, their parents, and their schools treat them. I was nearly among them. Schools refuse to teach our triumphs despite our community's prominence in history. Our history and culture is older than you think, so please, teach it. History calls us close friends, colleagues, roommates in their 40s, anything but lovers. Because how dare 2 men genuinely love each other? Some of the most influential men in history had intimate and romantic relationships with other men. Queerness is a very natural thing, and not accepting that is just plain homophobia, which is killing us, and it could somehow kill someone you love if the mindset of what we are doesn't change. Those before me hid in bars underground, behind closed doors at the backs of buildings, and deep within themselves. We put the pain we felt into words to create novels and poetry, into inventions that shape societies, and into work that help change how people see us in the future. Queer people are more than who we love. We are what we create as well as what we leave behind. Our culture is eccentric colors with people from all walks of life, wonderfully perverted art, and loud, earth-shaking music. The most beautiful thing about queer history is how it crosses all nations, borders, religions, family ties, social classes, ages, genders, and areas of academia. It can inhabit nearly every single part of society due to cartons of blood, gallons of sweat, and pools of tears. If you will allow me to inform you on some basic queer history, it should be known that pride parades did not just start one summer half a century ago. The first acts of pride were riots in cities like San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York, and Washington, D.C., against police that were trying to arrest queer people for acts of indecency and disturbing the peace. Fighting is what we do. Despite all the times our community has been beaten down, getting back up again and again is who we are. It's who I am. Every loss our community faces motivates a future victory. One fateful night, someone threw a brick at a police officer during a raid on the Stonewall Inn in New York City in 1969. Police raids were normal at gay bars. The abuse of power that was displayed was not the first, and eventually someone got angry about it and threw a brick at the very police officers who were meant to serve and protect them. This riot stuck. Unlike so many others in the years and decades before, Stonewall paved the way for the gay liberation movement, and its leaders need to be taught. October is Queer History Month, and we are at a college with an abundance of resources to educate yourself with, so please use them. Those who are writing history are finally realizing that there is not anything wrong with a man holding another man's hand. It was only 6 years ago that I finally got the right to marry who I wish in any state of this country. Some ask why we still want more if we have that. To that, I answer a long list of things that queer people are still working towards. Equal representation for healthcare, a faith that does not condemn us, a government that cares for us, an end to conversion therapy for queer youth, repeal of laws which legalize discrimination on the basis of religious beliefs, recognition and protection for queer people internationally, reduction in suicide, depression, and homelessness of queer people, an end to the sexualization and fetishization of lesbians and trans women, legislation for workplace protections for queer people in all 50 states, repeal of bathroom bills that prevent trans folk from using the appropriate restrooms, recognition and remembrance for the countless individuals who died in the HIV and AIDS crisis, and reparations for the survivors, and schools that want to teach their students about us. I am not a maker of history, because anybody can write history, but only the great can make it. Thank you.
Okay, I didn't write a speech because I'm lazy, and also I need to type myself up really quick. Just give me a second. Whew. All right, so you heard some really factual things from these three, which is really nice. I don't do facts. I do emotion. I'm necessarily not the facts guy. I'm here to just tell you, you're still you. Let me explain. When I guess you can call it a coming out of sorts, it was accidental. I was 16, working in a bowling alley with my mom, who also gave me the job. I was working in the arcade, she was working in the snack bar. I was tired, I got off around like 10:30 at night, she was still working till close. I was sitting in the office, and we were just talking, as me and my mom usually do. And it got heated to the point where I brought up the fact that, I don't know, I felt a little off. That I just didn't feel like me. And so she started going through a whole Rolodex of reasons of like how I shouldn't be like depressed, or, I have a roof over my head, I have a job, I have money, you shouldn't feel off. What's wrong with you? And so I offered up the thought of, hey, maybe I really didn't want to take this girl to prom that you really made me take to prom, or I didn't want to go to prom with her, not because I didn't like her, but because I didn't like her. Mom, I don't think I like girls. And so then she goes off on how it's wrong, or it goes against your religion and everything else, and how I would go to hell and things like that if I'm gay. And I said, so what if I am? And then she looked me in my eye and told me, then I would have failed as a parent. How do you respond to that? How do you go against years or a decade and a half of expectations that are just placed upon you? At some point, everyone here on this campus knows exactly how that feels to have everything placed on your shoulders all at once and then expected to deal with it. So imagine my surprise when I'm even younger than 12 years old trying to figure out, this doesn't feel like a sort of friendship thing. Is this a crush on a random guy in my class? Imagine the hours I spent crying, screaming, and praying that this would go away and that I would be forgiven of all my sins that I haven't even committed. So, no one told me everything was going to be okay. So imagine living with that particular thought of, I'm not worth love, I'm not worth your time, I'm not worth your energy because I simply like guys. That's really screwed up, honestly. So my place here is not to land facts at you, that's boring. Not to, down these guys, I'm not the fact guy. I'm here to tell you it's gonna be okay. You're okay. You're not going to hell just because you like a guy. You're not going to hell because you don't feel right in your body. You're not going to hell because you feel another way towards somebody. You're going to hell because you're a terrible person. You live despite of that. And let me tell you, fighting against that thought of you're not worth it is a very big thing to do. I'm still dealing with that. Hell, over the summer, I almost slit my wrists. I know that was really awkward, but the point is, I didn't have that. so I'm still dealing with it. But it's thanks to you guys at Wabash that actually helped me open up somewhat and be vulnerable, because I didn't get that. And for you, if you feel some type of way, if you feel a slight crush you never felt before towards somebody else that's kind of out of your comfort zone, you're okay, and you're still you. Just because you like somebody of the same gender doesn't make you different. It makes you human. You're fine. And if you need somebody to talk to, hell, I'm always here, and I always work. Come see me. Moral of the story is, you're still going to heaven regardless. Love is love. Just don't be a terrible person. So, and with that, thank you so much, Wabash.
A few final announcements before we leave. On Saturday, the cross-country team will be a part of the Louisville Cross Country Classic. Our football team travels to Denison, and our Little Giant soccer team hosts Hiram here at 1 p.m. Now please join me in singing Old Wabash. Da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. From the hills of Maine and the western plain, where the cotton is